It's time for Top Story on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Well, this week in the news, the Canastawega School Board, some members of the school board said that they're thinking of doing another school merger vote. Last time it was with Alfred Alman and Arkport. These board members at Canastawega seem to think that if they do another merger vote, they could possibly connect with Arkport because there was a lot more rejection from Alfred Alman than there was from Arkport. Also, Governor Andrew Cuomo appointed some panel members to review Common Core. Now, on the show this week is Matt Zeller, a former congressional candidate who now helps English-speaking interpreters get out of the Middle East. His organization is called No One Left Behind. I was doing some research about the Middle East, and I stumbled onto this website, and I'm so glad I did. I knew that Matt was doing this, and then I saw this on Facebook. I thought Matt would be a perfect guest for the weekend. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's an honor.
Well, Matt Zeller, People magazine noted in February of this year that you helped raise $35,000 for an interpreter who you worked with in Afghanistan when you were in the war there. And you also helped get that same interpreter out of the Middle East, too. This article is from February of this year. It says that there's a list of over 6,000 interpreters at that time, in February of this year, that were trying to get the State Department to help them get out of the Middle East. Matt Zeller, is that number still in the 6,000s?
Actually, it's higher. It's 16,000. Yeah, the gentleman that you're talking about was my former translator from the war. His name's Janet. He actually, I consider him to be my brother at this point. He's a full-fledged member of my family. To the extent that he calls my birth parents, our parents, mom and dad, our kids, they're growing up together thinking each other as cousins. I mean, Brian, the reality is, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it hadn't been for that guy. He literally saved my life. He shot and killed 2 Taliban fighters who were about to kill me in a firefight in Ghazni, Afghanistan in April of 2008. It took us 5 years to get him a visa, and the visa that he was promised, by the way, to come here. For a lot of folks don't know is that our military, our government made a promise to all of the Afghans and the Iraqis who signed up to serve with our forces downrange. We told them that if they gave us what we deem to be a year's worth of honorable and valuable service, they find themselves in duress because of that service, meaning if someone is trying to kill them for it or hurt their families for it, so long as they can pass a very comprehensive national security background investigation. The average time, by the way, it takes to go through one of those investigations is 3 to 4 years.
Why so long?
Pardon?
Why does it take so long?
Well, every 3-letter agency that you would imagine would be involved in that process is, and they are extremely thorough. The reality is that it's not well coordinated in that they don't do it all at once. Like CIA will look at somebody's background, and then 7 months later, FBI will look into it, and they don't all just sit down and say, okay, we're all looking at this one person today. If they did that, they could probably get the processing time down to a couple of months as opposed to years. But that's a conversation for another day. The reality is the system works. It's been in place since 2008. Since that time, we've brought over approximately 24,000 translators and their families. There's another 16,000 to go. Each one of those 16,000 represents a family of, on average, 5. So we're talking around 80,000 people who were made this promise and are currently being left behind. When Janice arrived here in America in October of 2013, so 2 years ago this month, I picked him up at an airport in Washington, D.C., and there was a CBS Canberra news crew there to tell this story nationally the next day and put it on TV. And they filmed our reunion, and then the cameras turned off, and I turned to my brother, and I said, okay, let's get the rest of your luggage and let's get you home. And he pointed to these 4 small rollaway carry-on bags, and, the ones that you would actually carry on the plane. And he said, brother, we're only allowed to bring 1 bag per person. So he had one for himself, his wife, and his 4-year-old son, and his 2-year-old daughter. And he said, they have to be under 50 pounds. That's what we were told. And so I was realizing at that moment, they came to America with the clothes on their back, and their bags were filled with family heirlooms, the things that they were never going to sell, the stuff that they wanted to pass on to their children. And at that moment, I turned to look for the representative of what I assumed was the government resettlement program for these people, to quite frankly yell at them and chew them out and ask them how could this be good policy and what was he supposed to do. And I learned at the airport that there is no resettlement program for these people. They're simply on their own upon arrival in the U.S. And so it was incumbent upon me, it was up to me to find Janice a house and to furnish it and help him get a job and get a driver's license and a car and everything else. And so I turned to the CBS News reporter and I said, listen, you got to do me a favor. Tomorrow when you tell the world about our story and what happened here, can you also let folks know that he has come with nothing, and I'm going to try and raise some money to help him and his family get their lives started. And so she said, sure. I put up a website, a GoFundMe, an online fundraising page, called GoFundMe. And about 3 days later, I went to check the bank account that we had set up to collect the money, and there was over $35,000 in the account from complete strangers. And so I went to go give my brother, who's had nothing his whole life. He was born the year before the Soviets invaded and destroyed his country. He grew up during the Soviet War as a child. He spent his teenage years in his early 20s living in a refugee camp in Pakistan because his family had to flee Afghanistan the day the Taliban took the capital city of Kabul. His life, quite frankly, should be a movie, and just in terms of how much he's struggled and, quite frankly, given back to our country. And yet, he's had nothing this whole time, and so I go to give him a check of $35,000, enough to cover his rent for at least a year or two and all of his groceries, and I tell him, brother, you're safe, no one is coming to kill you, and here's enough money to take care of you and your family for at least the next year or two. And honest to goodness, Brian, he looked at that check and he thought about accepting it for maybe half of a heartbeat. And he said, brother, I can't take this money. And I said, well, what do you want to do with it? And he said, well, what about Hassan? What about Latif and Jamshid and Maiwan?
All the other interpreters he knows.
Translators. Yeah, he was naming all the other guys we had served with. And he said, don't they deserve to be here too? And I said, yeah, you're right. Well, what do you want to do with this money? And he goes, can't we start an organization to help resettle others? Get tip here. And so that's what we've done. We're now in 9 cities. The organization is called No One Left Behind. I do this full-time. We've got a chapter actually in Western New York, headquartered out of Rochester, where we've got about 37 people we're currently helping to integrate and take care of. We have 3 operations. Operation Lost in Translation, which is our commitment to any veteran who served in Iraq or Afghanistan. If you want to get your translator out of harm's way and over to America, we'll help you do that. Once they arrive here, we'll engage you with our Operation Welcome Home, which is we'll pick your guy up from the airport and give him the honored welcome that he has quite frankly earned. We'll then pay for their housing for up to 3 months. We'll fully furnish their home at no cost to them, and we'll get them a car so that they can get to and from a job that we also help them acquire. And then finally, we have something called Operation Got Your Back, which is we'll actually assign volunteers who want to help out with this. We have a lot of families who call us up, churches. They say, hey, we'd love to be able to be a resource to these people, a sounding board if they have questions, if they need to know how to, where to get groceries, what doctor to see, how to enroll their kids into school, etc. We have people who we partner them to make sure that they don't fall through cracks and that they truly get assimilated and integrated. Our goal is real simple. We want to be out of business within 10 years. We want to get every single one of those translators over here, take whatever money we've raised at that point, and put it into a trust fund or an endowment to help set up a college scholarship for them and their children. And then I'm going to go on and do something else with my life. But this is, Brian, I'll leave you with this. There's 2 differences between me and my translator. The first is that I won the birth lottery. I got to be born in the greatest country in the history of human civilization. My brother didn't. He lost the birth lottery. He was born in Afghanistan the year before the Soviet invasion. Now, Afghanistan's a beautiful country filled with a lot of wonderful and very nice people, but it was a very bad time and an opportune moment for him to have been born. So in that case, he really did lose the birth lottery, where I won it. That's the first difference between us. The second difference, however, is the only one that should count, which is that I'm a one-tour combat veteran. Now, I've been all throughout the district, and, my family's been here for, the last 200 years or so, and folks know us, and I've been profusely thanked by my fellow citizens for my service for the 1 year that I did downrange. Profusely, and I can't begin to thank people for their support and just the way that they've expressed that. It means the world to me and the folks that I serve with. But my brother Janice did 9 years on the front lines for our country. 9 years back to back. He was there the year before I got there. He was there when I was leaving. He was going on to the next unit. 9 years on the front lines in defense of our freedom. And had he been born an American, had he won the birth lottery, we would celebrate him as a 9-tour combat veteran. But because Janice lost the birth lottery, he can't go to the VA. He can't talk to the VA counselors about the 6 times he's been blown up, about the numerous times he's been in harm's way and in combat. He's not extended veterans preferential hiring standards. He doesn't get a VA-backed mortgage. He got a welcome to this country in terms of a visa, and then that was it. He was abandoned at the airport. And had it not been, for the serendipitous that I was there and was doing all I could to get him here, he might be homeless to this day, or even worse, God forbid, he might have made the decision, like some have, to choose to go back to Afghanistan and Iraq because they end up finding the transition in America to be too difficult. And once they do that, that's a guaranteed death sentence. Just make no mistake about it. We are saving these people from our common enemy.
You say that it's on your Twitter page, you say that every 36 hours an interpreter is killed by the enemy in Afghanistan. How is it the enemy knows how to find the interpreters?
You're absolutely right. Every 36 hours, someone who worked with our military is murdered by the Taliban and their ilk for their service to our country in Afghanistan. These are our allies, and more importantly, to those of us who have served with them on the front lines, they're our fellow veterans, and they've earned their right to be here.
How is it that it's known that they did some interpreter-translator work?
I mean, look, Janice never veiled himself. He never once wore a mask. And I'm not kidding around when I said we were a frontline unit. I was embedded with an Afghan army and police unit. If there's anybody who's outside the wire, most often it was our unit. We were engaging with the Afghan population on a daily basis, just in terms of trying to teach the police to do common basic police work, patrolling their area, learning their community. And so we were the ones that that had the highest instances of likelihood of being in combat. We were the ones who got shot at the most. Every time we had a fight, that we would be fortunate enough to capture a bad guy and detain them, who do you think's doing the translation as we're trying to figure out who they are on the battlefield? Our translator. Well, they never once wore masks. They didn't veil themselves. And when I once asked Janice, why don't you veil yourself? Why don't you hide your identity? He looked at me and he said, brother, this is my country. I want them to know my face so that they fear me. And I couldn't help but love him for that because he was defending his homeland. And he never once, by the way, said to me, bro, listen, the reason why I'm doing this is because I hope to one day get a visa to come to the U.S. After he saved my life, I asked him if he wanted me to help him get a visa, and he said no. He hoped one day I could come back and visit him as his brother and a guest in his country. It was only after the Taliban placed him on the top of their hit list and publicly put a bounty on him and his wife and his children's heads that he decided for the good of his family that his country was collapsing, the security situation was too dangerous. The only way he could ensure keeping them alive was to get them out of country and bring them to the one place that he knows he's quite frankly earned refuge and safety, and eventually his citizenship, which is the United States of America.
If someone, Matt Zeller, wanted to give donations to your Rochester No One Left Behind office or any of the other offices that you have, you say you have about 9 offices in the United States helping people out. Correct me if I'm wrong in the number. How would they give to No One Left Behind?
So we're, by the way, that's a great question. We're entirely funded by the support of everyday people. We don't take a dime of government money. We've got the support of listeners that are listening to this radio and folks who find us on the internet, and that's how we sustain ourselves. We're almost entirely volunteer-driven. So the way that you can get in touch with us to donate or to volunteer or send, we're always looking for furniture and other types of support. You can go to the website. It's nooneleft.org. So nooneleft.org. All of our contact information is there. We'd be honored to have any type of help and assistance that your listeners could provide.
So the website, nooneleft.org, and that's where people can go to help give to No One Left Behind. Matt Zeller, we opened the interview with Matt saying that 24,000 interpreters have been gotten out of the Middle East so far. And how many more did you want to get out, Matt?
I've said, so that 24,000 people are with their family members. So it's around 20,000, around 24,000 translators. There are 16,000 translators left that have applications pending. They represent on average an average family of 5. That's around roughly 80 to 100,000 people.
A lot of work to do left. No One Left Behind. Matt Zeller, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
Saying good morning now to Corning Republican Congressman Tom Reed. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you as always, Brian, to be on the show.
Wanted to talk first about Alstom in Hornell. The latest there, Congressman.
We're continuing to move down the positive direction of getting that contract finalized, the I's dotted, the T's crossed. Obviously, we've had some good news that the senator announced, and we've been working hand in hand with all the local, state, and federal officials to make sure that we continue, because there's a lot of work to be done, and I was a little concerned when the senator took the lead and made the announcement that he did. But we'll work behind the scenes, because at the end of the day, it's not about cutting ribbons. It's not about showing up at a rally. It's about doing that, but also making sure the deal is done, because the hundreds of people that are going to benefit because they're going to have a job as a result of that is something that I want to see come to fruition and be in existence. And that's when I'll take a break and celebrate.
Sounds great. Wanted to talk to you about a Facebook posting that you made on Wednesday night. On your Facebook page, you said that you're supporting Congressman Scalise for the House Majority Leader post. Now, I'm guessing that Scalise would get the House Majority Leader post if Kevin McCarthy leaves the Majority Leader's job for Speaker of the House. Is that right?
That's correct.
You haven't said yet if you're for McCarthy or Trey Gowdy or who you're supporting. A simple Google search shows that, you've worked with Kevin McCarthy before. And I think you've said on this show that, you're on good terms with Trey Gowdy. Are you leaning in one direction or the other?
Well, right now, as I've reached out to people over the last week in the district and talked to different groups, this is the time for the debate and the election. And that's where people get confused, because they think it's on the floor of the House. But really, the election that matters is the one in the conference that will be done by secret ballot on October 8th. And so we have to make sure that if there are any candidates out there, because we're talking about the Speaker of the House, I want to make sure that we have all the candidates have an opportunity to put forth their vision, their goals, and their ideas. Now, obviously, I know Kevin McCarthy, and I have a high regard and respect for Kevin, and he has shown and demonstrated to me a capability to lead. But what I wanted to do is make sure that this is an open debate, and so we're gonna see what happens over the next few days. But when we go into that election, it's not on the floor of the House to vote. It's the election in front of conference, because that's done by secret ballot. And when we get to the floor, to me, it's our candidate versus Nancy Pelosi is as simple as it comes down to.
So for newsroom purposes, it would be too early to say that you're supporting Kevin McCarthy, but you're trying to stay out and let the debate work itself out.
Yeah, I'd like to see the debate prosper as much as possible, and if there's other candidates that want to get in, and I know Trey Gowdy very well, and he's a fine representative, but he just 2 days ago personally said to all of us that he will not do that. He will not consider taking that position. So I think he's taken himself out of the equation. But, there's a lot of other men and women here in Congress that should have an opportunity to put forth their vision going forward. And so we're just waiting. But at the end of the day, whoever comes out of our conference vote, where we do this by a secret ballot, to me, when we go to the floor of the House, this is about standing for our nominee versus Nancy Pelosi, because the floor vote is something that is really the general election, and what we're doing right now is electing the primary, and obviously this primary is going to dictate who the next Speaker of the House is going to be.
On the topic of speakers, John Boehner, your thoughts on him?
You know, I've worked with the Speaker for 5 years now. Got to know him. He's one of 12. I'm one of 12. And I will tell you, he had a tough job. But the one thing I always respected about John Boehner was his even-keeled way of legislating. Even in the darkest crises that we've seen down here, I was impressed by his ability to just stay calm, not make rash decisions based on emotion, and move forward. So I always respect him for that. Now, obviously, I've had differences with him, as many other members, as well as people across the country have. I wish he, as I told him, I wish he'd go out more on national TV and show that passion and that messenger that I think we're all looking for. But he just wasn't wired that way. And so everybody's not perfect, but I think he's done as good of a job as possible given the circumstances, and he'll always have my respect because of our friendship and what he's done for this country over the years.
Wanted to ask you about Congressman Chavez there and the Secret Service, where the Secret Service had to apologize this week to Congressman Chavez, the Utah Republican, for apparently trying to smear him and embarrass him because Chavez was a critic of the Secret Service. Yeah,
I mean, he sits in the chairmanship of the Oversight Committee. I mean, his primary and sole responsibility is to hold the administration and these agencies accountable. And when he did that with the Secret Service, it's apparent that they went through an organized effort to try to go through his personal records, and they were going to put out a personal smear campaign to discredit him. It goes back to the IRS issue. It goes back to what we have done here in our country over the last 80 years. There has been a delegation of power from Congress to the executive branch, and these agencies are unbelievably off the radar, engaging in power grabs and doing things like this. That's where we have to have this conversation, and Congress needs to take back that authority that our founders envisioned, where we had co-equal branches in the judicial, the legislative, and the president branch, executive branch, and we need to adhere to that much more going forward. But when you see an agency like that trying to abuse its power to go after someone who's trying to hold them accountable, it's wrong, and we're going to highlight it, we're going to spotlight it, and hold the people accountable. And at least I appreciate the director of the Secret Service coming out and apologizing to Jason and recognizing that the people under his organization that engaged in that were doing wrong. And my hope is he, to the fullest extent of the law, holds them accountable.
Okay, Planned Parenthood appeared before the House this week. Wondering, Congressman, were you there for any of that?
Yeah, we were here, obviously, throughout that entire debate. We supported the efforts to defund Planned Parenthood because if you look at these videos, and I encourage everyone, take the 10, 15 minutes. I mean, there's 8 videos, and watch them beginning to end. And when you had the forensic expert come in and say there was no manipulation of these videos, these were straight, unedited videos that have been presented to show this appalling practice of selling baby parts for money. That's against the law, and it's also just, it's unbelievable to me that anyone would defend that type of practice. And so we supported that defunding effort, but at the same time, I was more than willing to take that money from Planned Parenthood and give it to the 9+ federally sponsored health organizations that exist in our district, give them the resources that are providing women health care services across the district, across the country, and make sure that women health care need is met. I believe in that. No one disagrees with that. But what we're talking about with Planned Parenthood is holding an entity accountable for violating the law and engaging in the sale of baby parts. I mean, if we don't as a country come together and say, you know, that's wrong and you need to be held accountable for doing it, I question where we go from here.
You voted this week, along with the 9 other Republican congressmen from Western New York, to continue funding the government to avoid a shutdown.
I did, and I think that allows us to be in a position. Obviously, I'm looking for a long-term solution, and what we vote on every day here is what's before us. And what was put before me, which got through the Senate and is going to get to the President's desk, is the fundamental question. Do we need to take a little bit more time to try to put a long-term deal together, or do we shut the government down? And at this point in time, I'm going to give benefit of the doubt to the ability for us to come together, get that long-term deal. I'm the eternal optimist. And rather than shut down the government, have our troops potentially go unpaid, all the impacts of that government shutdown that goes on as a result of it, my thought process is let's really get to the heart of the issue and come up with long-term solutions, and I'll engage with anybody in order to get that done.
Talking with Congressman Tom Reed on Top Story. The Russian airstrikes against Syria, they began after Putin got permission from the Russian parliament. What do you think about the Russian moving against Syria like that?
What I'm looking and seeing in that area and watching Russia flex its muscles is the direct result of an administration, a president, that clearly does not have a strong, consistent foreign policy. Also, is indicated numerous times a level of weakness that we have not seen an American president demonstrate on the world stage. Now, I appreciate the need for diplomacy. I appreciate the human desire to avoid war. I went to the floor of the House on the Iranian deal and encouraged people to take a look at what we said there. No one wants war, but you cannot be foolish or naive to think that there are not evil people in the world that have to be dealt with sternly and in a sense of responsibility for our American interests. You need to make sure we stand for America first. And so what I'm watching with Russia is they take advantage of that vacuum of leadership. Russia's positioning itself to take out Assad's enemies. I think that's where the bombing campaign is clearly being directed, but it's being directed under the cover of a political statement that they're taking on ISIS. And so they're exploiting the situation for their own purposes. And from my perspective, this is why we need an American leader, an American president that has a clear, consistent foreign policy. And when they draw red lines, they adhere to those red lines. And they send the message to the world like Ronald Reagan said with the Iranian hostages. Enough is enough. We're bringing our people home.
Being reported on Associated Press and the other news outlets that the U.S. military top brass wants to keep troops in Afghanistan beyond 2016. What do you think of that, Congressman?
You know, obviously, I'm not supportive of long-term nation-building efforts or long-term entanglements. But if what we're contemplating and what we're discussing, and we're still getting into the details as to what the proposal is a status of force agreement, something that we should have done with Iraq, where we would have had an understanding with the host country that we would have access to military resources or have military resources there readily available in order to take on the threat that is going to pop up in that region of the world. It is clear to me that the terrorist threat is strong and it's growing and it needs to be dealt with. And from my perspective, to have platforms, be it in Afghanistan, Iraq, other Middle Eastern areas, that we can strike from in order to take that threat on head first and take care of it over there rather than on American soil, I'm going to be part and supportive of that strategy. To me, that strategy makes sense. But if what they're asking is that we put a large ground-based force in order to occupy Afghanistan and stay there indefinitely, no, I'm not going to be supportive of that. What I think we're talking about and what we should be talking about is having that capability to take care of those threats that arise so that we hit them and deal with them over there rather than on American soil.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has been in the news a lot lately, pushing her 9/11 legislation. She's trying to get continued medical funding for the 9/11 emergency responders who are sick, and she says in some cases still dying from being exposed to the toxins. Wondering, what did you think of her legislation? Did you support that?
Yeah, no, obviously I applaud the senator's efforts in regards to the 9/11 fund. It is something we've talked directly with Steve Scalise and other members of leadership as a priority, not only for New York, but of course for all of our law enforcement and first responders that potentially are dealing with this fallout situation from 9/11 still to this day. So I'm very optimistic. I think we have a path to get this taken care of. And in the Senate, I applaud Kirsten for doing what she's doing, and you know, I'll give credit where credit is due. And this is one of those times where Senator Gillibrand is on the right track, and we're going to be supportive of that effort here in the House, and hopefully we can get this done before the end of the year.
And final question for you, Congressman. Was there anything I did not bring up that you wanted to discuss?
Well, I love those open-ended questions. Just that we're going to continue to put the people of the district first and foremost, and that's why the Alstom deal is such a important project for us, and I look forward to getting that contract signed and those announcements coming and those 750 potential jobs created right there. The Photonics Center of Western New York, we had a report recently that kind of people informally estimate there's going to be 30 to 40,000 jobs created just on that advanced manufacturing center that I authored and got signed into law with Joe Kennedy and others last year. So we got some great things, and now we got St. James continuing down the right path. That's the success in Hornell reminds me that we can get things done. But in order to get things done, we as a community, we as a state, we as a nation must come together and fight for those common areas that we believe in. And once we do that, that's what I saw with the Hornell community when we went to those meetings and people were in the halls coming together, banding for St. James, and we went to Alstom and all the employees got together. I'm telling you, we're strong when we're united, especially in Western New York, because we have the brightest and most common sense people in the entire nation right there in our home area. And that's why I'm so proud to be a representative of those 700,000 strong that are good people.
Congressman Tom Reed, as always, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks as always, Brian, and we'll talk soon, I'm sure.